The great hall of the Galactic Concord stretched for miles in every direction. Its walls were made of living crystal that pulsed with soft light. The ceiling showed the stars themselves, a window into the endless black of space. Here, the rulers of 17 different species gathered to discuss the fate of worlds. High Arbiter Kethral stood at the center of the speaking platform. His scales gleamed under the starlight, each one a deep shade of purple that marked him as royalty among the Sitheks. His people were warriors, conquerors. They had built an empire across 300 star systems, and they hungered for more. But today, Kethral was not here to discuss conquest. He was here to ask a question that had bothered his people for generations. "I demand to know," he said, his voice echoing through the vast chamber, "why Sector 7G remains closed to us." A murmur ran through the assembled delegates. The insectoid cricks clicked their mandibles in agreement. The gas giant dwelling Omnith flickered with curious colors. Even the stone-like breviary shifted their massive bodies to pay attention. Sector 7G was a mystery. A single yellow star on the edge of known space, surrounded by a quarantine zone that no ship was allowed to enter. The prohibition was older than most civilizations in the Concord. No one remembered why it existed. No one questioned it. Until now. "The quarantine has stood for 12,000 years, replied Ambassador Veth of the Omnith, his gaseous form swirling with annoyance. "Why question it now?" "Because my people need resources," Kethral answered. "Our war with the cricks drains us dry. The asteroid belts of Sector 7G contain minerals worth more than entire star systems. And what guards them? Nothing but an ancient law and primitive radio signals from a single planet. The law exists for a reason," said a new voice. Everyone turned. The speaker was not a delegate. It was something far older. The Valanthi rarely attended assembly meetings. They had no need for politics or trade. They were ancient beyond measure, their bodies made of crystal that had formed when the galaxy was young. They watched, they remembered, and sometimes, when they felt it necessary, they spoke. This Valanthi was known only as the Witness. It was said to be the oldest living being in the galaxy. Its crystalline form towered above the other delegates, casting rainbow shadows across the floor. "The law exists," the Witness repeated, "because we created it. Long ago. Before your species crawled from your birth seas. Arbiter. Before the cricks built their first hive. Before any of you existed. We found what lives in Sector 7G. Kethral narrowed his eyes. "And what lives there that frightens the mighty Valanthi?" The Witness was silent for a long moment. When it spoke again, its voice was different, softer, almost sad. "They call themselves humans." Another murmur rippled through the assembly. Humans. The word meant nothing to most of them. A primitive species on a primitive world, radio signals and chemical rockets. Nothing worth fearing. "We found them long ago," the Witness continued. "They were barely more than animals then. They fought each other with sharpened stones and lived in caves. But we saw something in them, something that made us watch more closely." "What did you see?" asked one of the breviary, its voice like grinding rocks. "Potential. Terrible potential." The Witness's crystal body flickered with old memories. "They learned faster than any species we had ever encountered. In the time it took other civilizations to discover fire, they had built cities. In the time it took others to build cities, they had split the atom. They grew faster than anything we had ever seen." Kethral laughed. "So they are intelligent. Many species are intelligent. This is no reason to fear them. You do not understand." The Witness moved closer, and despite himself, Kethral took a step back. "It is not their intelligence that makes them dangerous. It is what lies beneath it. We studied them, Arbiter. We watched them for thousands of years. And what we saw terrified us." The hall fell silent. No one had ever heard a Valanthi admit to fear. "They are not bound by logic," the Witness said. "They do not follow the laws that govern all rational life. They will sacrifice themselves for abstract concepts. They will die for ideas. They will burn their own worlds rather than surrender them. And worst of all, they remember. They hold grudges for generations. They pass their hatreds from parent to child like precious gifts." "Superstition," Kethral said, but his voice was less certain now. "Old stories to frighten children. I wish that were true." The Witness turned to address the entire assembly. "We made contact with them once. Just once. We sent a delegation to their world when they were still young. We meant to guide them. to help them, to show them the path to the stars. What happened? Asked Ambassador Veth. They welcomed us at first. They were curious, eager to learn. But then one of our scientists made a mistake. He treated one of their leaders with disrespect. A small thing. A breach of protocol that would mean nothing to any civilized species. The witness paused. They killed him. Not quickly, not cleanly. They kept him alive for days, learning everything they could about our biology, about our weaknesses, and then they broadcast a message to our ships. What message? Kethril asked. 2 words. Leave now. We thought it was a bluff. We had technology they could not imagine, weapons they could not comprehend. We sent a single warship to demonstrate our power, a small display. Nothing that would harm their world, just enough to show them their place. The witness's form flickered again. They destroyed it. We still do not know how. They were using wooden sailing ships on their oceans, but somehow they destroyed a Valanthi warship. When we sent investigators to learn what happened, they found nothing. The humans had taken everything. The technology, the bodies, the records, everything. Impossible, said one of the Krix delegates. No primitive species could destroy Valanthi technology. That is what we thought. So we sent a larger force. 50 ships, enough to conquer any world in the galaxy at that time. And, Kethril demanded, none returned. We received a final transmission from the fleet commander before all contact was lost. She said they had been boarded, that the humans were inside the ships, that they were everywhere and nowhere. And then she said something that has haunted us ever since. The witness's voice dropped to a whisper. She said they were smiling. A chill ran through the assembly. Even Kethril felt it, though he would never admit it. After that, the witness continued, we made a decision. We would not try to conquer the humans. We would not try to contact them again. We would seal their system and hope they never found a way out. We erased all records of our contact. We forbade any species from entering their space. And we waited. Waited for what? Asked Ambassador Veth. For them to destroy themselves. That is what we hoped. They are violent, self-destructive. They fight each other constantly. We believed they would burn their world to ash before they ever reached the stars. The witness turned back to Kethril. But they have not destroyed themselves. They have grown. They have built machines that fly. They have touched their own moon. And every day, they come closer to breaking free of their quarantine. You are asking us to fear a species that has barely left their own world, Kethril said. This is madness. I am asking you to heed our warning. The witness's voice hardened. The quarantine must hold. No one must enter Sector 7G. No one must make contact with the humans, because if you do, if you provoke them, if you give them a reason to turn their eyes toward the stars with anger in their hearts, you will doom us all. Kethril was silent for a moment. Then he laughed. I have heard enough. The mighty Valanthi, rulers of the ancient galaxy, afraid of animals who have barely discovered spaceflight. This is not wisdom. This is senility. Several delegates laughed with him. The Krix clicked their mandibles in amusement. Even some of the Omnith flickered with skeptical colors. I move to lift the quarantine, Kethril announced. Let us see these humans for ourselves. Let us show them what true power looks like. I second the motion, said the Krix delegate. The witness said nothing. It simply stood there, ancient and silent. As the assembly voted, the motion passed by a wide margin. Only the Valanthi voted against it. And when the vote was finished, the witness turned and began to drift toward the exit. Where are you going? Kethril called after it. The witness did not turn around. Home, it said. To prepare. Prepare for what? Now, the witness did turn. Its crystalline form caught the starlight. And for just a moment, it seemed to contain all the sorrow of the ages, for the end of everything you know, and then it was gone. The assembly continued its business. Trade agreements were signed. Territorial disputes were settled. The lifting of the quarantine was celebrated as a triumph of progress over superstition. 300 years passed. The Scythex dominion grew powerful. Their war with the Krix continued, draining resources from both sides. And all the while, the riches of Sector 7G called to them. Untapped asteroid belts, virgin planets, wealth beyond imagination. High Arbiter Kethril had long since died, but his descendants carried his ambitions. His great-great-grandson, also named Kethril in his honor, rose to command the Dominion's greatest fleet. 16 dreadnoughts, 400 support vessels. The most powerful military force the Sithx had ever assembled, and it was aimed at a single yellow star on the edge of known space. Commander Kethril stood on the bridge of his flagship, watching the stars streak past as his fleet traveled through hyperspace. In a few hours, they would arrive at the Sol system. They would claim its riches. They would add humanity to their list of conquered species. He had read the old records, the Volanthi warnings, the stories of vanished fleets and smiling killers. He considered them nothing but propaganda. The Volanthi were old and tired. They feared everything. But the humans were just humans. A single species on a single world. They had never faced a real enemy. They had never seen the power of a true interstellar civilization. They would learn. "Commander," said his second, a young officer named Vethal, "we will arrive at the Sol system in 3 hours. Good. Prepare the broadcast. I want these humans to know who their new masters are." "Yes, Commander." "And if they resist?" Kethril smiled. It was not a kind smile. "Then we will teach them the cost of resistance." The fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system. Kethril looked at the view screen and saw the yellow star at the center, surrounded by its collection of planets. The third one from the star was his target, a blue and green world covered in water and vegetation. Earth. He could see their satellites, their space stations, primitive things, barely worthy of the name. They would fall in minutes. "Open a channel," he commanded. "All frequencies." "Channel open, Commander." Kethril leaned forward. This was the moment he had waited for. "Attention, people of Earth. I am Commander Kethril of the Sithx Dominion. Your quarantine has ended. You are now under the jurisdiction of the Dominion. You will surrender immediately. You will grant us full access to your planet and its resources. In return, we will elevate you to the status of a client species under our protection. Resist, and you will be destroyed. You have 1 hour to comply." He sat back, satisfied. The humans would see his fleet. They would understand the hopelessness of their situation. They would surrender. The response came in less than a minute. "Scythex vessel. This is Earth Defense Command. Identify yourselves. State your intentions. You have entered sovereign space without authorization." Kethril frowned. This was not the fearful response he had expected. "I have already stated my intentions, human. You will surrender. Immediately." There was a pause. Then the human voice returned. "We decline. Leave." 2 words. Just like the Volanthi legend. Kethril felt a chill run down his spine, but he pushed it aside. He would not be frightened by coincidence. "You misunderstand your position," he said. "I have 16 dreadnoughts, 400 warships, enough firepower to glass your entire planet. Surrender is not a request." Another pause. Longer this time. Then a different voice came through the channel. Older. Calmer. A voice that had seen things Kethril could not imagine. "Sithx Commander. This is Admiral Chen of Earth Defense Command. I'm going to say this once, so listen carefully. We know who you are. We know why you're here. And we know what you did to the Volanthi fleet 3,000 years ago." Kethril's blood went cold. That was impossible. The Volanthi had erased all records. "That's right," Admiral Chen continued. "We found their ships. We studied them. We learned from them. We've been preparing for this day for a very long time. You're bluffing. Maybe. Or maybe the Volanthi should have wondered how a species with wooden ships managed to board their vessels." The Admiral's voice hardened. "Last chance, Commander. Turn around. Go home. Tell your people that Earth is not worth the cost. Because if you stay, if you fire a single shot, we will show you exactly why the Elders sealed us away." Kethril's hand trembled. For just a moment, he considered retreat. For just a moment, he remembered the old stories, the warnings, the fear in the witness's voice. Then his pride took over. "Fire on their orbital stations," he commanded. "Show them what happens to those who defy the Dominion." "Commander, are you sure? The Elder warned us about—" "I said fire." The weapons officer hesitated for just a second. Then he obeyed. The beams lanced out from the dreadnought, striking the nearest human station. It exploded in a ball of fire and debris. Secondary explosions rippled through its structure as atmosphere vented into space. Kethril smiled. Let the humans see what true power looked like. Then Admiral Chen's voice came through one final time. You were warned. The channel went dead, and somewhere in the cold depths of space, the humans began to move. The first attack came 3 days after Commander Kethral destroyed the orbital station. He had expected immediate retaliation, a desperate counterattack by primitive ships that his fleet would crush without effort. Instead, there was nothing. The humans went silent. Their remaining stations powered down. Their ships retreated to low orbit around Earth. Kethral took this as a sign of surrender. He moved his fleet closer, preparing to begin the occupation. He was wrong. The attack did not come from Earth. It came from behind. A supply ship at the rear of the fleet exploded without warning. Then another. Then 3 more. By the time Kethral realized what was happening, 12 of his support vessels were nothing but burning wreckage. "Report!" he screamed. "What hit us?" "Unknown. Commander." The sensor officer was staring at his screens in disbelief. "We detected no weapons fire. No missiles. No energy signatures. The ships just exploded." "Ships do not just explode. Find me answers." But there were no answers. The Sithx had the most advanced sensors in the known galaxy. They could detect a shuttle at 10 light years. They could track a missile across an entire star system. They could not find what was killing them. More explosions rippled through the fleet. A fuel tanker erupted, taking 2 nearby frigates with it. A communications relay was torn apart from the inside. One of the dreadnoughts reported intruders in its engineering section, then went silent. "They're inside us," Vethal whispered. "Commander, they're inside our ships." "Impossible. Our shields are up. Our hulls are sealed." "Then how are they doing this?" Kethral had no answer. He watched his view screen as another dreadnought listed to one side, smoke pouring from its engines. Something had crippled its power systems, something that had gotten inside without triggering a single alarm. "Get me Admiral Chen," he ordered. "Now." The communications officer worked frantically. After several minutes, the human's face appeared on the view screen. She looked calm, almost bored. "Commander Kethral? Having trouble? What are you doing? What weapons are you using?" Admiral Chen smiled. It was the smile from the old stories, the smile that had haunted the Valanthi for 3,000 years. "Weapons? We haven't fired a single weapon yet, Commander. These are just our welcome gifts. Small packages we attached to your ships while you were making your speech. Our people have been aboard your vessels since you arrived." "That's impossible. You scanned for technology. You scanned for energy signatures. You didn't scan for people floating in the void with nothing but a suit and a bomb." Her smile widened. "Did you know humans can survive in space for almost 2 minutes without protection? Just long enough to attach a surprise to your hull and get back to the shuttle." Kethral felt sick. "You sent your own people into space without protection?" "We sent volunteers. Thousands of them. People who knew they might not come back. People who chose to risk their lives for their world." She leaned forward. "That's what you don't understand about us, Commander. We're not afraid of death. We've been dying for our homes since before your species existed. It's what we do." Another explosion. Another ship lost. "Call them off," Kethral demanded. "We'll negotiate. You destroyed our station. You killed 800 people. Engineers, scientists, families." Chen's voice was cold as ice. "There will be no negotiation. There will only be consequences." The channel went dead. The attacks continued for 6 hours. By the time they stopped, Kethral had lost 93 ships. Not to weapons fire, not to enemy fleets, to humans who had floated through space with bombs strapped to their backs, found their targets, and completed their missions even as they died. Kethral ordered a retreat to the outer system. He needed time to regroup, time to understand what he was facing. But the humans did not give him time. The second wave came from the asteroid belt. Mining ships, cargo haulers, vessels that looked like they had been built in a scrapyard from spare parts and prayers. They should not have been able to fight a Sithx patrol boat, let alone a dreadnought, but they did not fight like Sithx. They fought like humans. The first mining ship came in on a collision course with the dreadnought Vengeance. The Sithx gunners opened fire, confident in their superior weapons. The mining ship exploded under their barrage, and then the debris kept coming. The humans had packed the ship with metal fragments, millions of pieces of shrapnel, traveling at the same speed as the original vessel. The Vengeance's shields held against the first wave, but the second wave brought more ships. More debris. More fragments. Death by 1,000 cuts. The Vengeance's shields failed after 40 minutes of continuous bombardment. Once they were down, a single human ship flew directly into the dreadnought's exposed hull. The explosion killed everyone on board. "They're ramming us," Bethal said, his voice hollow. "They're using their own ships as missiles." "No species does that," Kethral replied. "No species sacrifices ships and crew for a single kill. Humans do." The battle lasted for 3 weeks. The Scythex had superior technology, superior numbers, superior everything. It did not matter. The humans did not play by the rules of civilized warfare. They did not meet the Scythex fleet in open battle. They hid. They waited. They struck at supply lines and fuel depots. They used tricks that no rational species would consider. They dropped rocks from asteroids onto Scythex positions. They hacked into communication networks and broadcast false orders. They captured a damaged frigate and flew it back to the fleet with a skeleton crew, only to detonate a hidden bomb once it was inside the defensive perimeter. They turned every advantage against the Scythex. The dreadnoughts were powerful, but they were slow. The Scythex shields were strong, but they needed time to recharge. The Scythex soldiers were disciplined, but they had never faced an enemy that did not care about dying, and through it all, the humans learned. Every weapon the Scythex used, the humans studied. Every tactic they employed, the humans analyzed. Every piece of technology they left behind, the humans collected. 6 months into the war, the first human ship with Scythex-style shields appeared. It was crude, unstable. It failed after a single battle, but the second one worked, and the third one worked better, and by the time a year had passed, human ships were appearing throughout Scythex space with technology that should have taken centuries to develop. Commander Kethral sent a message to the Dominion High Command. He had lost half his fleet. He had failed to take Earth. He had failed to even establish a foothold in the Sol system, and now the humans were pushing back. The response from High Command was immediate. Reinforcements were on the way. The Dominion would not be humiliated by primitives, but Kethral knew the truth. He had seen it in the eyes of his soldiers. He had felt it in his own heart. The Scythex were afraid. The reinforcements arrived 2 months later. Another 12 dreadnoughts. 300 support ships. Fresh troops who had never faced humans, who still believed the war would be easy. They learned quickly. The humans had changed their tactics. They were no longer content to defend. They attacked. Constantly. Relentlessly. They hit targets throughout Scythex territory, appearing from nowhere and vanishing before reinforcements could arrive. They bombed fuel depots. They assassinated commanders. They freed prisoners from labor camps and recruited them as soldiers. They turned the Scythex's own conquered peoples against them, and they used fear as a weapon. The Scythex were used to enemies who fought with honor, enemies who announced themselves, enemies who followed rules. Humans followed no rules. They killed in silence. They struck in darkness. They left messages written in blood on the walls of command centers. They broadcast the screams of dying Scythex soldiers on military frequencies, letting the sound echo through every ship in the fleet. They made the Scythex afraid to sleep. Admiral Kethral, as he was now called after his father's death in battle, received a captured human soldier for interrogation. He wanted to understand. He needed to know what drove these creatures. The human was a woman, small, thin. She had killed 7 Scythex soldiers with nothing but a knife before they captured her. "Why do you fight?" Kethral asked her. "You cannot win. We have more ships, more soldiers, more resources. You must see that this war will end only one way." The woman looked at him with eyes that held no fear, no anger, just cold, patient determination. "You attacked our home," she said. "You killed our people. You threatened our children. So you fight for revenge?" "No." She smiled that terrible smile. "We fight because that's what we do. We've been fighting since before we could stand upright. We fought animals. We fought the weather. We fought each other. We fight because it's in our blood. It's who we are." "Then you are animals," Kethral said. "Savage beasts who cannot control their instincts, maybe." The woman leaned forward, as far as her restraints would allow. "But we're the beasts who tamed fire, who split the atom, who walked on our moon and dreamed of stars, and now we're the beasts who are coming for you. You will lose. Eventually one of us will lose. But it won't be today, and it won't be tomorrow. And every day we survive. We get stronger. Every battle we fight, we learn more. Every weapon you use against us becomes a weapon we use against you." Her smile widened. "How long do you think you can keep this up, Admiral? How many soldiers are you willing to sacrifice? How many ships? How many worlds?" Kethral said nothing, "Because I can tell you exactly how many we're willing to sacrifice." She looked directly into his eyes. "All of them. Every last one. We will burn our own worlds before we let you take them. We will fight to the last human. The last child. The last breath. That's what your elders tried to warn you about. That's why they sealed us away." She sat back. "We don't know how to stop. We never have. And you just gave us a reason to keep going forever." Kethral had the woman executed. It did not make him feel better. The war dragged on. Years passed. The Sithx threw everything they had at humanity, and humanity threw it back twice as hard. The Dominion's economy crumbled under the strain. Worlds that had been conquered generations ago began to rebel, inspired by human resistance. The Krix, smelling weakness, increased their attacks on Sithx borders, and the humans kept coming. They took their first Sithx colony world in the 7th year of the war, a small planet called Veth Prime. The Sithx had expected them to destroy it, to glass the surface and kill everyone on it. Instead, the humans occupied it. They set up hospitals. They offered food and shelter to the Sithx civilians. They treated the wounded soldiers and released them. It was the cruelest thing they could have done, because the soldiers went home with stories. Stories of humans who could have killed them but chose not to. Stories of kindness mixed with terror. Stories that made no sense. How could a species that fought like demons also show mercy like saints? The answer came from a human broadcast, transmitted on all frequencies so every Sithx in the galaxy could hear it. "People of the Dominion, this is Admiral Sarah Chen of the Human Alliance. Your leaders started this war. Your soldiers invaded our home. Your weapons killed our families. But we do not hold you responsible for the crimes of your rulers. We know that most of you never wanted this. You were following orders. You were doing your duty. We understand duty." A pause. "So we're offering you a choice. The civilians on Veth Prime are free to leave whenever they wish. The soldiers we captured will be returned to their families. We take no pleasure in killing those who cannot fight back. That is not who we are." Another pause. Longer. When Chen spoke again, her voice was harder. "But make no mistake. We will not stop until this war ends. We will not negotiate while Sithx fleets threaten our worlds. And we will not forgive the architects of this invasion. Your high command will face justice for what they have done, not revenge. Justice. There is a difference." The broadcast ended. 3 weeks later, a rebellion erupted on Sithx Prime itself. Citizens who had lost sons and daughters in a war they never wanted. Soldiers who had seen the enemy up close and no longer believed the propaganda. Leaders who knew the war was lost and wanted to save what they could. Admiral Kethral died in the fighting. Some said he was killed by rebels. Others said he took his own life when he realized what he had unleashed upon his people. The truth died with him. The war officially ended, 11 years after it began. The Treaty of Sol was signed in the same great hall where the Valanthi had given their warning centuries before. The Sithx dominion was broken. Not destroyed, the humans had made sure of that. But diminished. Reduced. A shadow of what it had once been. And humanity stood among the stars for the first time. Not as supplicants or subjects, but as conquerors who chose to show mercy. The Valanthi watched in silence. They had predicted war. They had predicted destruction. They had not predicted this. The witness spoke to the human ambassador after the treaty was signed. "You could have destroyed them," it said. "You had the power, the justification. Why did you spare them?" The ambassador, a young man named David Chen, grandson of the admiral who had first faced the Sithx, considered the question carefully. "Because we're not just warriors," he said finally. "We're builders too. Healers, teachers. We've spent our whole history learning how to destroy, but we've also learned how to create, how to forgive, how to move forward. The Sithx would not have shown you the same mercy. I know. That's why we had to show it to them. Someone has to be first. Someone has to break the cycle." He smiled, a human expression that the Valanthi were still learning to read. "Besides, we're going to need allies for what comes next." "What comes next?" "The Krix. The others. Everyone who's watching to see what happens now." The ambassador's smile faded. They've seen what we can do in war. Now we need to show them what we can do in peace. That's how we survive. That's how any of us survive. The witness was silent for a long time. Perhaps, it said finally, we were wrong about you. No. David Chen shook his head. You were right about us. Everything you said was true. We are dangerous. We are relentless. We don't know how to stop, but you forgot something important. What? We get to choose what we don't stop doing. And we choose to build, to help, to protect. His voice hardened. But if anyone else comes for our home, they'll learn the other side of us real fast. That part hasn't changed. That part never will. The witness understood. For the first time in millennia, it felt something it had thought impossible. Hope. But out in the galaxy, others were watching. Others were calculating. Others were convinced that the Scythex had simply been weak. The Crix Collective had learned nothing from the war they had witnessed, and they were about to make the same mistake. The supreme mind of the Crix Collective watched the humans with 1,000 eyes. The Crix were not like other species. They did not think as individuals. They were a hive, billions of bodies connected to a single vast intelligence. Each Crix drone was a cell in a greater organism. Each queen was a node in an endless network of thought, and the supreme mind was the brain that controlled it all. For 15 years, the supreme mind had studied humanity. It had watched them defeat the Scythex. It had analyzed their tactics, their weapons, their psychology. It had dissected every battle, every decision, every apparent weakness, and it had concluded that the Scythex were simply incompetent. The Dominion had sent 16 dreadnoughts. The Crix would send 1,600. The Scythex had relied on superior technology. The Crix would rely on overwhelming numbers. The Scythex had fought a war of pride. The Crix would fight a war of extermination. There would be no negotiation, no mercy, no survivors. The Supreme Mind gathered its forces in the darkness between stars, a fleet larger than any in galactic history, ships that blotted out the light of suns, soldiers numbered in the trillions. The humans had defeated an empire. Now they would face a hive. On Earth, the warning came 3 days before the invasion. Admiral Sarah Chen had retired after the Scythex War, but she had trained her replacement well. Admiral James Okonkwo stood in the command center of Earth Defense Command, watching the sensor data scroll across his screens. How many? He asked. We're still counting, sir. The sensor officer's voice was steady, but her hands trembled. Current estimate is 1,600 capital ships, support vessels in the hundreds of thousands. Troop transports carrying. We don't have a number. Trillions, maybe. The Crix don't do anything small. No, sir. Okonkwo studied the display. The Crix fleet was still 2 days out, gathering at the edge of the solar system. They were making no attempt to hide. Why would they? They wanted Earth to see what was coming. They wanted humanity to despair. They didn't understand humans at all. Send word to all defense stations, Okonkwo ordered. Begin evacuation of non-essential personnel from orbital platforms. Activate the deep space network. And get me a channel to the Valanthi. The Valanthi, sir? They've been watching us since the Scythex War. Time to find out whose side they're on. The witness appeared on his screen an hour later. Its crystalline form flickered with colors that human eyes could not fully process. Admiral Okonkwo, I wondered when you would call. You've seen the Crix fleet. I have seen it. It is the largest military force assembled in 10,000 years. Can we beat them? The witness was silent for a long moment. The Scythex came to conquer. The Crix come to exterminate. They will not make the same mistakes. They will not underestimate you. They will not stop until every human is dead, or your species proves impossible to kill. That's not an answer. No, it is not. The witness's form pulsed slowly. I have watched your species for millennia. I have seen you survive ice ages and plagues. I have seen you split atoms and touch the stars. I have seen you defeat enemies who should have crushed you without effort. But this, it paused. This is different. The Crix are not like the Scythex. They feel no fear. They know no hesitation. They are a billion minds working as one. So we can't win? I did not say that. I said this is different. In all my years I have learned one truth about humanity. Whenever I believe I know what you are capable of, you prove me wrong. Okonkwo smiled grimly. That's something, at least. There is one more thing. The witness leaned closer to the screen. The Crix believe they understand you. They have studied your tactics, your weapons, your history. They think they know how you fight. And they studied the humans who defeated the Scythex. They have not considered what a cornered humanity might do, what a desperate humanity might become. The witness's form flickered with something that might have been concern. Neither have I. Then I guess we'll all find out together. The channel closed. Okonkwo turned to his officers, men and women who had trained their entire lives for a war they hoped would never come. Behind them, screens showed the evacuation in progress, civilian ships fleeing to Mars colonies, military personnel taking positions throughout the system, the entire human species preparing for the fight of its existence. The Cricks think they're facing the same humans who fought the Scythex, Okonkwo said. They're wrong. We've had 15 years to prepare, 15 years to learn, 15 years to build. He pulled up a tactical display. The Scythex taught us how to fight. Now the Cricks are going to teach us how to survive. The first wave of Crick ships arrived at the edge of the solar system on schedule. The Supreme Mind had calculated every variable, predicted every possible human response. It expected resistance. It expected casualties. It had factored these into its plans. What it did not expect was silence. The human defense stations were dark. The orbital platforms showed no signs of activity. Earth's fleet was nowhere to be found. The entire solar system appeared abandoned. This was wrong. Humans did not flee. The Supreme Mind had studied their history. They fought until the last defender fell. They never retreated without a reason. It sent scout ships forward to investigate. None returned. The scouts entered the asteroid belt and simply vanished. No explosions. No distress signals. No sensor data. One moment they were there. The next they were gone. The Supreme Mind ordered more ships forward. This time, it watched through their sensors directly, processing every data point in real time. The scouts reached the outer asteroids. They began scanning for human presence. And then, the asteroids moved. Millions of rocks, each one hiding a weapon. Some held missiles. Some held mines. Some held nothing at all, just mass, accelerated to incredible speeds and aimed at Crick's ships. The humans had spent 15 years turning the asteroid belt into a killing field. The scouts died screaming, but the Supreme Mind did not panic. It had expected casualties. It had prepared for traps. It simply adjusted its calculations and sent the main fleet forward. The fleet pushed through the asteroid belt, losing ships by the hundreds. The humans had been thorough. Every rock seemed to hold a surprise. Every path led through a minefield. The journey that should have taken hours took days. But the Cricks were patient. They had numbers. They could afford to lose 1,000 ships for every mile gained. Eventually, they reached the inner system. And there, waiting for them, was humanity. The defense platforms that had seemed dead came alive. Hidden stations revealed themselves. Ships that had been powered down lit their engines. And at the center of it all, orbiting Earth like a crown of iron, was the greatest fortress humanity had ever built, Station Phoenix. Okonkwo had spent a decade constructing it in secret, a platform the size of a small moon, bristling with weapons that humanity had invented just for this moment. Particle beams, kinetic launchers, missile batteries, technologies that no other species had ever seen. The Cricks fleet paused. For the first time in its existence, the Supreme Mind felt something that might have been uncertainty. Then it attacked. The Battle of Sol was the largest conflict in galactic history. Millions of ships, trillions of lives, the fate of an entire species hanging in the balance. The Cricks came in waves. They did not care about losses. They did not care about casualties. They were a hive, and the hive would survive even if billions of drones died. They threw themselves at the human defenses with mindless determination, trusting in numbers to carry the day. And for a while, it worked. Human ships fell. Defense platforms were overwhelmed. Station Phoenix took damage that should have destroyed it 10 times over. The outer defensive lines collapsed one by one, but humanity did not break. For every ship they lost, they made the Cricks pay double. For every platform that fell, another held twice as long. The defenders fought with a fury that the Supreme Mind had not calculated, could not comprehend, because the Cricks had made a mistake. The same mistake the Scythex had made before them. They had threatened Earth. Across the solar system, humans who had never held a weapon picked up guns and went to fight. Scientists who had spent their lives in laboratories flew cargo ships into enemy formations. Children said goodbye to their parents and went to die for a world they might never see again. The Cricks had studied human tactics. They had not studied human hearts. On the fourth day, Station Phoenix fell. Okonkwo had known it would happen. The Cricks simply had too many ships, too many soldiers, too much firepower. No defense could hold forever. But Phoenix's fall was not a defeat. It was a trap. As the Cricks swarmed over the station, Okonkwo gave his final order. The fusion reactors at Phoenix's core overloaded simultaneously. The explosion vaporized the station and everything within 1,000 kilometers. 300 Cricks capital ships died in an instant. Okonkwo died with them. His last words, broadcast on all frequencies, were simple. For Earth, the Supreme Mind reeled. It had lost more ships in that single explosion than the entire HFY War had cost them. Its calculations were in ruins. Its predictions were worthless. And the humans kept fighting. With Phoenix gone, humanity fell back to the final line of defense. Earth itself. The Cricks expected this to be the end. The humans had nowhere left to run. Their fleets were shattered. Their stations were destroyed. All that remained was a single world, guarded by whatever forces humanity had left. The Supreme Mind ordered the final assault. What it found was a nightmare. Earth was not just defended. Earth was weaponized. Every ocean hid submarines loaded with nuclear missiles. Every mountain contained bunkers packed with soldiers. Every city was a fortress. Every citizen was a soldier. The humans had spent 15 years preparing their homeworld for this moment, and they had done something else. Something the Cricks had never considered. They had reached out to the SciFX. The ships that dropped out of hyperspace behind the Cricks fleet were not human. They were SciFX, former enemies who had learned what the Cricks had not. That humanity was terrible in war, but generous in peace. The SciFX had come to repay a debt. Caught between the human defenses and the SciFX fleet, the Cricks faltered. For the first time in the battle, the Supreme Mind considered retreat. But retreat was not in the Cricks' nature. They were a hive. They did not flee. They won, or they died. They chose death. The battle raged for 9 more days. The Cricks threw everything they had at Earth. The humans threw everything back. Cities burned. Continents shook. The sky itself seemed to crack under the weight of weapons fire. And then, on the 9th day, something broke. The Supreme Mind had always assumed it was invincible. 1 billion minds working as one. A network of thought that spanned star systems. Surely nothing could threaten such a being. But the humans had been listening to Cricks' communications since the war began. They had learned how the hive worked, how the queens connected to the Supreme Mind, how information flowed through the collective. They had found the weaknesses. On the 9th day, human special forces launched simultaneous attacks on 17 Cricks command ships. Not to destroy them, that was impossible, but to plant something in their communication systems. A virus, a weapon that the Cricks had never faced before. Chaos. The virus spread through the hive network like wildfire. It corrupted data. It crossed signals. It made the Supreme Mind see enemies where there were none, and miss enemies that were right in front of it. For the first time in its existence, the hive was confused, and in that moment of confusion, the humans struck, coordinated attacks across the entire system. Every remaining ship, every surviving soldier, every weapon that could still fire. They hit the Cricks with everything they had left. The Cricks lines shattered. The Supreme Mind tried to regain control, tried to reestablish order. But the virus was everywhere now, spreading faster than it could be contained. Drones turned on each other. Queens gave contradictory orders. Ships collided with their own allies. The greatest hive in the galaxy was tearing itself apart, and the humans did not stop. They hunted the surviving Crick ships across the system. They destroyed troop transports by the thousands. They showed no mercy, gave no quarter. They had been pushed to the edge of extinction, and now they pushed back with all the fury their species could muster. By the end of the 10th day, the Cricks invasion force was destroyed, not defeated, destroyed. Of the 1,600 capital ships that had entered the Sol system, fewer than 100 escaped. The trillions of drones that had dreamed of conquering Earth were dead, their bodies floating in the void between worlds, and humanity, battered and bloodied but unbroken, stood victorious. The Supreme Mind retreated to its core systems to rebuild. It had lost more than ships and soldiers. It had lost something far more precious, its certainty. For the first time in 10,000 years, the Krix collective knew fear, and out in the galaxy, everyone else was watching. The Valanthi, the Omnith, the Brevari, the dozens smaller species who had assumed humanity would be crushed. They had all been wrong. The elders had warned them. They had said humanity was dangerous. They had said the humans should be left alone. No one had listened. Now everyone understood. But the war was not over. Humanity had survived the invasion. Now they had to decide what to do next, and their answer would change the galaxy forever. The celebrations on Earth lasted 3 days. 3 days of joy. 3 days of relief. 3 days of mourning for the billions who had died defending their home. Then humanity went back to work. Admiral Maria Santos stood before the Council of Nations in the rebuilt United Earth Parliament. She was young for an admiral, just 42 years old. But the war had killed most of the senior officers. Those who remained had been promoted by necessity and hardened by loss. "The Krix will be back," she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes held a fire that had not been there before the war. Their invasion failed, but their hive survives. The Supreme Mind is wounded, not dead. Given time, they will rebuild. They will return with an even larger fleet, and next time, they will not underestimate us. The council chamber fell silent. "We have 2 choices," Santos continued. "We can wait here, rebuild our defenses, hope that the next invasion takes long enough for us to prepare. Or," she paused, "or we can take the fight to them." The debate lasted for weeks. Some argued for defense. Earth was wounded. The fleet was shattered. Humanity needed time to recover. Others argued for attack. The Krix had shown that they would never stop. As long as the Supreme Mind existed, humanity would never be safe. Better to strike now, while the enemy was weak. In the end, they voted for war. Not a war of conquest, not a war of revenge, a war of survival. Humanity would find the Krix. They would destroy their ability to threaten Earth. They would make sure that no species ever dared to attack humanity again. The counter-invasion began 6 months later. The human fleet that left Earth was not the desperate force that had defended the solar system. This fleet was designed for offense. Fast ships with heavy weapons, troop transports carrying soldiers who had learned to fight in the vacuum of space, a mobile force that could strike anywhere and disappear before the enemy could respond. And at the center of the fleet, a new flagship, the UES Vengeance. Admiral Santos commanded from its bridge, watching the stars streak past as humanity traveled to war. Behind her, the crew worked in focused silence. They knew what was coming. They knew what was at stake. They were not afraid. The Krix homeworlds were scattered across a vast region of space. Hundreds of planets connected by the Hive network. Some were breeding worlds, where queens spawned trillions of drones. Others were industrial centers, building ships and weapons for the collective. And at the heart of it all was the Supreme Mind itself, housed in a fortress that had stood for 10,000 years. Santos did not attack the fortress. Not yet. Instead, she attacked everything else. The first target was a breeding world called Nexus Prime. The Krix expected an assault from space orbital bombardment, landing parties, the standard tactics of civilized warfare. Instead, humanity used fire. Nexus Prime had an atmosphere rich in methane. Human scientists had discovered this during their analysis of Krix systems. They had designed a weapon specifically for this world. The missiles launched from Santos's fleet did not carry explosives. They carried ignition charges, hundreds of them, spread across the planet's atmosphere. The entire world burned. The Krix on Nexus Prime died screaming, their connection to the Hive broadcasting their agony to the Supreme Mind, the queens, the drones, the billions of lives that had hoped to spawn the next invasion of Earth, all of them, gone in a firestorm that lasted for weeks. Humanity had announced its presence. The Supreme Mind responded immediately. Fleets were dispatched to protect key systems. Defenses were strengthened around industrial worlds. The Hive prepared for a war unlike any it had faced before. But humanity did not fight like the Hive expected. They did not meet fleets in open battle. They did not siege industrial worlds. They did not follow any pattern the Supreme Mind could predict. They simply appeared, attacked, vanished. Human ships struck at supply lines, destroying convoys before they could reach their destinations. Human soldiers infiltrated Krix stations, planting bombs that exploded days or weeks after they had gone. Human hackers attacked the Hive network, spreading chaos and confusion through the collective mind. And always, they learned. Every battle taught humanity something new about the Crix. Every captured piece of technology was analyzed and improved. Every weakness was exploited, then exploited again in ways the Crix never anticipated. The war spread across Crix space like a disease. Santos divided her fleet into strike groups, each one operating independently. They hit dozens of targets simultaneously, forcing the Supreme Mind to spread its defenses thin. When the Crix concentrated their forces in one area, human ships appeared in another. When they tried to protect everything, they protected nothing. It was not the kind of war the Crix understood. It was not even the kind of war most humans understood. It was something new. Something born from desperation and refined by victory. Admiral Santos called it persistence warfare. We don't need to destroy every ship, she explained to her officers. We don't need to conquer every world. We just need to keep hitting them until they can't hit back, until they understand that the cost of fighting us is higher than any benefit they could ever gain. And if they don't understand? Asked her second-in-command, a young captain named Chen, grandnephew of the legendary Admiral Sarah Chen. Then we keep hitting them until there's nothing left to hit. The turning point came 18 months into the counter-invasion. Human forces had discovered something unexpected. Not all Crix were loyal to the Supreme Mind. On the outer edges of Crix space, there were colonies that had been cut off from the hive network, queens who had developed their own thoughts, drones who had learned to question. The Supreme Mind called them defectives, failures. It hunted them whenever they appeared, purging any sign of individual thought from the collective. But humanity saw something else. Admiral Santos sent envoys to the defective colonies. Not soldiers, not spies, just humans who wanted to talk, who wanted to understand. The conversations were difficult. The Crix defectives had never spoken with another species before. They did not trust easily. They expected treachery at every turn, but humanity was patient. Over months of careful diplomacy, an understanding emerged. The defective Crix did not want to be part of the hive. They wanted to think their own thoughts, live their own lives. They had been fighting for survival against the Supreme Mind since before humanity existed. And now, for the first time, they had allies. The alliance changed everything. The defective Crix knew the hive network better than any outsider could. They knew its weaknesses, its secrets, its fears. They shared this knowledge with humanity, and humanity shared something in return: hope. You are not defective, Santos told the Queen, who led the largest defective colony. You are free, and we will help you stay that way. The Queen's response was simple. Then let us show you how to destroy the mind that imprisoned us. The assault on the Supreme Mind's fortress was the largest military operation in human history. 300 human ships, 50,000 soldiers, and alongside them, the defective Crix queens and drones who had finally found the courage to fight back against the intelligence that had enslaved their kind for millennia. The fortress was everything the Crix had ever been. A structure the size of a small planet, bristling with weapons, shielded by technology that had held off attackers for 10,000 years. A monument to the power of the collective mind. It fell in 6 days, not because humanity was stronger, not because the defective Crix were braver. It fell because the Supreme Mind had never considered the possibility of betrayal. The fortress's defenses were designed to stop external attacks. They were not designed to stop Crix ships that carried the right codes, ships that had been given access generations ago. Access that the Supreme Mind had never thought to revoke. The defective queens knew these codes. They shared them with humanity. Human soldiers poured through gaps in the defenses that the Supreme Mind had not known existed. They fought through corridors designed for creatures with 6 legs and compound eyes. They pushed deeper into the fortress than any outsider had ever gone. And at the center, they found the Supreme Mind itself. It was not what they expected. Santos had imagined a computer, a machine, something that could be destroyed with explosives or disabled with a virus. Instead, she found a creature. The Supreme Mind was biological, a massive organism, larger than a city, that had grown over millennia to encompass the central core of the fortress. Its tendrils spread throughout the structure, connecting to the hive network, processing the thoughts of a billion Crix across the galaxy. It was alive, and it was afraid. You cannot destroy me, it said, speaking directly into Santos's mind. I am the collective. I am the hive. Without me, the Cricks will become animals again. Mindless drones without purpose or direction. That's not what the defectives tell us, Santos replied. The defectives are aberrations. Mistakes. They will not survive without my guidance. They've survived this long. They'll survive longer without you hunting them. The Supreme Mind's fear turned to rage. You are insects. You are nothing. I have existed for 10,000 years. I have conquered 1,000 species. You cannot. Santos raised her weapon. You attacked our home. You tried to kill our children. You made us fight for our survival. She stepped closer to the creature that had threatened her entire species. And now you're going to learn what happens when you make humanity desperate. She gave the order. The charges placed throughout the fortress detonated simultaneously. The explosion consumed the Supreme Mind, destroyed the central hub of the hive network, and shattered the structure that had seemed invincible for millennia. The Cricks collective died in an instant. Across the galaxy, billions of Cricks suddenly found themselves alone in their own heads. The voice that had guided them since birth was gone. The connection that had defined their existence was severed. Most of them went mad. The weeks that followed were chaos. Cricks drones turned on each other. Queens fought for dominance. Worlds that had been orderly for centuries descended into civil war. Humanity did not intervene. They watched. They waited. They helped the defective colonies protect themselves from the chaos. But they did not try to impose order on the Cricks. That was not their place. Eventually, the chaos subsided. The strongest queens established control over their own territories. The surviving drones formed new, smaller collectives. The Cricks race did not die, it transformed. And when the transformation was complete, the new Cricks leaders sent a message to Earth. They did not ask for forgiveness. They did not offer excuses. They simply stated a fact. The war is over. We will not attack again. Humanity accepted the message without celebration. There was nothing to celebrate. Too many had died. Too much had been destroyed. But there was something to build on. Santos met with the defective queen who had helped plan the assault on the Supreme Mind. The meeting took place on a neutral world, far from both human and Crick space. Your people are free now, Santos said. What will you do with that freedom? The queen considered the question carefully. Her species had been enslaved to the collective mind for so long that freedom was still a strange concept. We will learn, she said finally. We will grow. We will become something new. She paused. And we will remember what you did for us. Not the killing. That was necessary. We will remember the hope. Hope? You showed us that the Supreme Mind was not invincible. That change was possible. That even the oldest chains can be broken. The Queen's compound eyes focused on Santos. We will remember that, Admiral. And when your species needs allies, you will find them among us. It was not friendship. It was too early for friendship. But it was a beginning. Santos returned to Earth as a hero. The woman who had led humanity's counterattack. The woman who had destroyed the Supreme Mind. The woman who had proven that no threat, no matter how vast, could overcome human determination. She did not feel like a hero. She felt tired. She felt old. She felt the weight of every life that had been lost under her command. But she also felt hope. Humanity had faced 2 invasions. They had survived both. They had proven themselves to the galaxy. Now they had to decide what kind of species they wanted to be. Not just warriors, not just survivors, something more. The Galactic Concord was watching. The Valanthi were waiting. A universe of possibilities was opening before humanity, and for the first time in their history, humans were ready to reach out and grab it. But they would do it their way, on their terms, because that was what it meant to be human. 50 years had passed since the first Cethex ship entered the Sol system. 50 years of war. 50 years of loss. 50 years of learning what humanity was capable of when pushed to the edge of extinction. Now it was time for something new. The Great Hall of the Galactic Concord was as magnificent as it had always been. Crystal walls that pulsed with light. A ceiling that showed the stars themselves. Delegates from dozens of species gathered to discuss the fate of worlds. But the atmosphere was different now. The Cethex delegation sat quietly in the corner, their once proud scales dull with age and defeat. The Cricks representatives, the few queens who had emerged from the chaos after the Supreme Mind's destruction, huddled together, still learning how to think as individuals. The Omnith flickered nervously. The Bravari shifted their massive bodies with uncertainty. Everyone was waiting. Everyone was afraid. The doors at the far end of the hall opened, and the human delegation entered. There were only 5 of them, a small group compared to the dozens of delegates from other species. But as they walked down the central aisle, every eye in the chamber followed them. Every mind focused on their approach. Commander Sarah Chen led the delegation. She was the granddaughter of Admiral Sarah Chen, who had first faced the Scythex invasion. She was the great-niece of Captain Chen, who had died defending Station Phoenix against the Crix. She carried the weight of her family's legacy in every step. Behind her walked 4 others, a general who had led ground forces against the Crix, a scientist who had cracked the Hive Network's codes, a diplomat who had negotiated the alliance with the defective queens, and a poet who had written the words that kept humanity's spirit alive during the darkest days of the war. They reached the speaking platform and stopped. For a long moment, no one spoke. The hall was silent except for the soft hum of the living crystal and the distant whisper of stars. Then the witness emerged from the shadows. The ancient Volanthi had not changed in 50 years. Its crystalline form still towered above the other delegates. Its presence still commanded attention without effort, but there was something different in the way it looked at the humans, something that had not been there before. Respect. Humanity has asked to address the Concord, the witness said, its voice echoing through the vast chamber. The request has been granted. Commander Chen, you may speak. Sarah Chen stepped forward. She was 36 years old. She had been born during the Scythex War and raised during the Crix invasion. She had never known a time when humanity was not fighting for survival. Now she stood before the rulers of the galaxy, and she showed no fear. 50 years ago, she began, the Scythex came to our world. They came with demands. They came with weapons. They came with the certainty that we would surrender or die. She paused. We did neither. A murmur ran through the assembly. The Scythex delegates shifted uncomfortably. 15 years later, the Crix came. They came with more ships, more soldiers, more determination. They thought that what the Scythex failed to do with 16 dreadnoughts, they could do with 1,600. Her voice hardened. They were wrong. The Crix queens made sounds that might have been acknowledgement or shame. Your species have spent millennia building empires, conquering worlds, deciding who was civilized and who was not. You created rules for warfare, traditions for diplomacy, systems to determine who mattered and who did not. Sarah Chen looked around the assembly. And then, you met us. We did not know your rules. We did not follow your traditions. We did not accept your systems. When you came to conquer us, we fought back with everything we had. When you tried to destroy us, we survived. And when you thought you had won, we rose again. She stepped closer to the delegates. The elders tried to warn you. The Volanthi sealed us away for thousands of years because they understood something the rest of you did not. We are not like you. We do not think like you. We do not fight like you. And now you fear us. The words hung in the air. No one denied them. You should fear us, Sarah Chen continued. Everything the elders said was true. We are dangerous. We are relentless. We hold grudges for generations. We fight with a fury that your species cannot comprehend. When you threaten our homes, our families, our future, we become something terrible. She paused. But that is not all we are. The tone of her voice changed. Softer now. Almost gentle. When the Scythex War ended, we could have destroyed the Dominion. We had the power, the justification. Instead, we rebuilt their worlds. We treated their wounded. We gave them a chance to survive. She gestured toward the Scythex delegation. Ask them. Ask them if we showed mercy. Ask them if the species that terrified the Volanthi also built hospitals on conquered worlds. The Scythex ambassador, an old male with faded scales, nodded slowly. It is true, he said. We expected extinction. We received compassion. Sarah Chen turned to the Crix delegation. When the Supreme Mind fell, the Crix collective collapsed into chaos. Millions of your kind went mad. Worlds burned. Your entire civilization nearly destroyed itself. The queens shifted uneasily. We could have let you die. We could have finished what the war started. Instead, we helped the survivors find stability. We protected the defective colonies until they could protect themselves. We gave your species time to learn how to be free. One of the queens spoke, her voice clicking and strange to human ears. You destroyed our mind, our unity, everything we were. The Supreme Mind enslaved you, Sarah Chen replied. It controlled your thoughts. It decided your purpose. It hunted any cricks who dared to think for themselves. She met the Queen's compound eyes. We did not destroy your species. We liberated it. What you do with that freedom is your choice. But you have the chance to make that choice. That is more than the Supreme Mind ever gave you. The Queen fell silent. Sarah Chen turned back to the full assembly. So here is the truth about humanity. We are capable of great destruction. We have proven that beyond any doubt. When you push us to the edge, we push back with everything we have. We do not stop. We do not surrender. We do not forgive easily. But we are also capable of great creation, great kindness, great hope. We build as fiercely as we fight. We heal as passionately as we destroy. We dream of a future where our children do not have to live in fear. She raised her voice. The elders called us monsters. They were half right. We are monsters who build hospitals, predators who teach our prey to stand beside us, warriors who would rather have friends than enemies. We did not ask for these wars. We did not seek conflict with any species in this galaxy. We were content on our own world, looking up at the stars and dreaming of what we might find among them. You came to us. You threatened us. You tried to destroy us. And now we stand before you, not as conquerors, not as supplicants, as equals. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle over the assembly. We are claiming our place in this galaxy. The quarantine is over. The isolation is finished. Humanity is here, and we are not going anywhere. You can accept us as partners. You can trade with us. Learn from us. Let us learn from you. Together, we can build something better than any of us could build alone. Or, you can fear us. You can scheme against us. You can plot and plan and wait for a moment of weakness. Her voice dropped, cold and certain. But know this. If anyone else attacks our home, they will learn what the Sithx learned, what the Cricks learned, what the elders tried to warn you about for thousands of years. We do not know how to stop. We never have. So choose wisely. Silence fell over the great hall. The delegates looked at each other. Old rivals who had spent centuries competing for power. Ancient species who had thought themselves above the young races. Conquerors who had never faced a species that could conquer back. All of them. Humbled by a people who had clawed their way from caves to stars in the blink of a cosmic eye. The witness spoke first. You have proven everything we feared about you, it said. And everything we hoped. What did you hope? Sarah Chen asked. The ancient Volanthi moved closer. Its crystalline form caught the starlight, scattering rainbows across the floor. We hoped that when you finally joined the galaxy, you would bring something new, something none of us possessed. Its voice was soft, almost gentle. We hoped you would bring the courage to choose mercy over vengeance, to build instead of destroy, to reach out your hand to former enemies. The Sithx attacked you, and you rebuilt their worlds. The Cricks tried to exterminate you, and you freed them from slavery. You have every reason to hate, every justification for revenge, and yet here you stand, offering partnership. That is not weakness, Commander Chen. That is strength beyond anything we have seen in 10,000 years. The witness turned to address the full assembly. I propose that humanity be granted full membership in the Galactic Concord, with all rights, all privileges, all responsibilities. They have earned this through blood and sacrifice. But more importantly, they have earned it through wisdom and compassion. How did the delegates vote? The votes came quickly. The Omnith voted yes. They had watched humanity from the beginning and seen something precious in them. The Bravari voted yes. They had been neutral in the wars, but they recognized strength when they saw it. The Sithx voted yes. They had been enemies once. Now they knew better. The Crix Queens voted yes, one by one. They owed humanity their freedom, even if they did not fully understand it yet. Every species voted yes, every single one. Sarah Chen stood on the speaking platform, watching the votes register. She felt the weight of history settling around her shoulders, the culmination of 50 years of war, the beginning of something new. She thought of her grandmother, who had faced the Sithx with nothing but courage and determination. She thought of her uncle, who had died aboard Station Phoenix to buy humanity a few more hours. She thought of all the billions who had fallen defending Earth and fighting for survival. They had given everything so that this moment could happen. She would not let them down. On behalf of humanity, she said, I accept your welcome. We look forward to learning from you, to sharing with you, to building a future together." She paused and allowed herself a small smile. "But I also want to make something clear. Our nature has not changed. We are still the species that the elders warned you about. We are still capable of everything that terrified them. We choose peace. We choose partnership. We choose hope. But choice is something we do every day. And every day, that choice remains ours to make." The message was clear. Humanity was offering friendship, but the alternative was always there, waiting. The same fury that had destroyed the Scythex fleet and shattered the Crix Collective. The choice belonged to the galaxy now. The assembly ended. Delegates dispersed to their ships. Messages were sent across the stars. The news of humanity's acceptance spread to every corner of known space, but the witness lingered in the Great Hall, watching the human delegation prepare to leave. "Commander Chen," it called. Sarah turned back. "Yes?" The ancient Valanthe approached her slowly. Its form flickered with colors she could not name. "I have lived for a very long time," it said. "I have watched species rise and fall. I have seen empires born and die. I thought I understood the patterns of the universe. And now I realize that I know nothing." The witness's voice held something that might have been wonder. "You are unlike anything we have ever encountered. You terrify me, and you give me hope. Which feeling is stronger?" The witness considered the question. "Today, hope." Sarah Chen smiled. Not the cold smile that her enemies had learned to fear. A warm smile. A human smile. "Then we're making progress." She turned and walked out of the great hall, leaving the witness alone with the stars. The future was uncertain. There would be challenges ahead. Not every species would accept humanity's rise. Not every conflict would end peacefully. But for the first time in 10,000 years, the galaxy had something it had lacked. A species that refused to give up. Refused to surrender. Refused to accept that some problems could not be solved. A species that carried both destruction and creation in their hearts, and chose every day which one to embrace. The elders had warned them about humans. They should have listened. But perhaps, in the end, that warning was not about fear. Perhaps it was about hope. Hope that somewhere in the vast darkness of space, there was a species that could change everything. Hope that had finally found its answer. In a small blue world orbiting a yellow star, 8 billion humans looked up at the sky and saw their future. And for the first time in history, the stars looked back without fear. The war was over. The peace had begun. And humanity was just getting started. The day the ships came, most people were just going about their normal lives. Paul Harris was drinking coffee on his porch in rural Ohio when his phone started buzzing with alerts. He looked up at the sky and saw it, a massive dark shape blocking out the morning sun. All across Earth, people stopped what they were doing and looked up. The ships were huge, at least a mile long each, with smooth metal surfaces that reflected sunlight in strange patterns. There were 7 of them, positioned over major cities around the world. In Washington, D.C., General Carol Bennett rushed into the Oval Office. The president looked pale. Nobody had detected the ships coming. They had simply appeared as if they had always been there. "Sir, we've established communication," General Bennett said. "They're calling themselves the Galactic Imperial Fleet." The president nodded slowly. "What do they want?" "They say they want to meet with Earth's leaders." "They sound amused, sir." At the United Nations building in New York, representatives from every nation gathered in emergency session. The largest ship hung directly over Manhattan, casting a shadow that stretched for miles. News helicopters circled at a safe distance, broadcasting live footage to billions of frightened viewers. Admiral George Williams of the United Earth Defense Force stood at attention. He had been chosen to lead the first contact team. At 62, Williams had gray hair and steady hands. He had never expected to meet aliens, but he was determined to represent humanity with dignity. "Admiral, your team is assembled," said an aide, gesturing to the 5 other people waiting nearby. Ambassador Susan Miller adjusted her blue suit nervously. As the top diplomatic advisor, she had studied theoretical first contact scenarios for years. None of her training felt adequate now. Next to her stood Dr. Alan Foster, a tall, thin man with thick glasses who specialized in biology and potential alien life. He carried a tablet loaded with Earth's scientific knowledge ready to share. The other team members included Dr. Kevin Patel, a linguist, Major Linda Howard, security expert, and Sam Rivera, a cultural anthropologist. They all looked up as the holographic communicator in the center of the room flickered to life. A face appeared, if you could call it a face. It had 6 eyes arranged in a circle and a small mouth that moved in odd ways when it spoke. Its skin was bluish and seemed to shimmer. "Greetings, humans," it said in perfect English. "I am Overlord Zax Thule of the Galactic Imperial Fleet. We have arrived to assess your world for potential integration into our empire." The alien's voice sounded almost bored, as if this was a routine errand. Admiral Williams stepped forward. "On behalf of Earth, we welcome you and hope for peaceful relations. We request a meeting to discuss—" Yes, interrupted Zax Thule. "Standard procedure. We will transport your delegation to our vessel in 1 hour. Bring no weapons. They would be useless anyway." The communication ended abruptly. Dr. Foster turned to Williams. "Did you notice how they spoke? They're not concerned about us at all. They don't see us as a threat." Williams nodded. "That might work in our favor." An hour later, the contact team stood on the roof of the UN building. A beam of light shot down from the ship above, surrounding them in a column of blue energy. Ambassador Miller felt her stomach lurch as they were pulled upward, rising through the air toward the massive vessel. The inside of the Imperial ship was vast, with ceilings that seemed to go up forever. The walls were made of some kind of living metal that pulsed with light. Alien beings moved about, some like Zax Thule, others with completely different forms. None of them paid much attention to the humans. They were led to a large circular room. In the center stood Overlord Zax Thule, surrounded by what appeared to be advisors. The Overlord was taller than he had appeared in the hologram, at least 8 feet high, with a body that tapered to a narrow waist and 4 arms. "Welcome, Earth creatures," said Zax Thule. "You may consider yourselves fortunate. We have decided your species is interesting enough to preserve." Ambassador Miller stepped forward. "Overlord, we appreciate your greeting, but we are not seeking to be preserved. We wish to establish diplomatic relations as equals." A sound like grinding stones came from the aliens. Williams realized they were laughing. "Equals? How charming," said Zax Thule. "Your species has barely mastered simple space travel. You still use combustion engines and electronic devices. We have been traveling the stars for 50,000 years." Dr. Foster was studying a display on the wall. It showed various star systems, and what appeared to be wormhole routes between them. Something about the pattern seemed off to him. "Your method of faster-than-light travel," he said suddenly. "May I ask how it works?" One of the alien advisors, smaller than Zax Thule, but with similar features, turned to look at Foster. "Your species couldn't possibly understand our dimensional fold technology. We use the natural weaknesses in reality to move between spaces." Ambassador Miller noticed the advisor's tone. It wasn't just dismissive. There was something else there. Pride perhaps, but also a lack of curiosity. These beings believed they knew everything worth knowing. "We have theories about such travel," Miller said carefully. "Our scientists have considered the possibilities of dimensional manipulation." "Theories? How quaint," said Zax Thule. "We have controlled the very fabric of space for millennia. But enough of this. We are here to inform you of your place in the Empire." A 3-dimensional image appeared in the center of the room, a map of Earth with various regions highlighted in different colors. "We will establish bases on your world. Your governments will continue to function under our supervision. Your resources and some of your population will serve Imperial needs. Those who cooperate will enjoy Imperial protection and limited access to some of our technologies." Admiral Williams felt his face grow hot. "And if we don't agree to these terms?" Zax Thule's 6 eyes blinked in sequence. "Then we will take what we need anyway, with less concern for your survival. It is quite simple." As the meeting continued, Major Howard noticed something strange about the ship. There were occasional flickers in the walls, brief moments where the living metal seemed to ripple unnaturally. The aliens didn't react to these events as if they didn't notice them or considered them normal. After 2 hours of tense discussion, the human delegation was returned to Earth. As they descended in the blue beam, they could see that smaller, Imperial ships had already begun landing in various locations around the world. Back at the UN building, they reported to the Emergency Council. "They see us as primitive," said Williams. "Barely worth their attention." "That's not good," said the Secretary General. "Actually," Dr. Foster spoke up, "it might be our only advantage. I noticed something about their technology. There's something wrong with it. Something they don't seem to understand." Ambassador Miller nodded. "I felt it too. They're advanced? Yes, but there's a blindness to them. A certainty that they know everything." "What can we do?" asked the Secretary General. "Their ships are already landing. People are panicking." Williams looked at Foster. "You said there's something wrong with their technology. Can you figure out what it is?" Foster nodded slowly. "I'll need access to our best physicists, and we need more data from their ships." "I'll put together a team," Williams said. "If they think we're too primitive to be a threat, maybe they won't guard their secrets too closely." Outside, the shadow of the Imperial ship still darkened the sky. But for the first time since the ships appeared, there was a small flicker of hope. 3 days after first contact, Dr. William Chen stood in his lab at MIT, surrounded by holographic displays showing Imperial technology. The government had managed to get images and scans from the alien ships as they landed around the world. Chen had hardly slept since then, trying to understand what he was seeing. "This doesn't make sense," he muttered, adjusting his glasses. "Their energy systems are incredibly powerful, but they're so wasteful." His assistant, Mary Clark, looked up from her computer. "What do you mean?" "It's like they're using a sledgehammer to crack a nut," Chen said. "Look at this engine design. They're forcing their way through space-time instead of working with its natural properties." Outside the lab windows, they could see an Imperial shuttle landing in the large field that had once been a sports complex. The aliens had set up a cultural exchange center on campus, though most students and faculty avoided it. The few who had visited described being treated like clever pets by the Imperial staff. Dr. Chen's phone rang. It was Nancy Howard, a mathematician working at the National Science Foundation. "William, I've been looking at the data you sent," she said, her voice tense. "I think I found something important. Can you secure this call?" Chen pressed a button on his phone, activating the encryption system. "Go ahead." "The equations describing their FTL technology. I modeled what happens if they continue using it at current levels. William, it's not sustainable. It's creating micro-tears in the fabric of reality." Chen felt his mouth go dry. "How bad is it?" "Bad. My models predict a critical failure point within 5 years. Not just their ships. I'm talking about dimensional collapse across entire star systems." Chen looked again at the Imperial shuttle outside. "We need to tell them." "I already tried," Nancy said. "I went through proper channels, met with their science team yesterday. They dismissed everything I said, called our math charmingly primitive." "We need more evidence," Chen said. "And we need someone they'll listen to." At the White House, Richard Davis, the UN Secretary General, was meeting with Lord Krell, the Imperial ambassador. Krell was smaller than Overlord Zax Thule, but had the same bluish skin and 6 eyes. He sat uncomfortably in a human chair, looking bored. "Ambassador, we have concerns about your dimensional fold technology," Davis said. "Our scientists believe it may be causing damage to space-time itself." Krell made the grinding noise that passed for laughter among his species. "Your scientists? Your species has barely touched the stars. Do not presume to lecture the Empire on matters beyond your comprehension." Davis pushed a tablet across the table. "Please, just look at the data. The dimensional tears are already starting to appear. One was detected near your base in Australia yesterday." Krell glanced at the tablet for barely a second before pushing it away. "Nonsense. What you detected was simply a normal fluctuation. Our technology has been perfected over thousands of years." After the meeting, Davis called Admiral Williams. "They won't listen. We need to try another approach." "I might have something," Williams said. "One of the Imperial scientists has been asking questions. His name is Vrexnor. He seems less dismissive than the others. Can you get him to meet with our team? I'm working on it, Williams said. But we need to be careful. The Imperial Command doesn't like their people mixing too much with humans. Addie, the NASA Research Center in Houston, Captain Lisa Rodriguez sat at her monitoring station. As commander of the science vessel Horizon, currently in orbit, she had been tasked with scanning the Imperial ships from a distance. Are you seeing this? She asked her science officer, Ben Wilson, pointing at a readout on her screen. Wilson leaned in. Energy spikes? They're getting stronger. And more frequent, Rodriguez said. Look at the pattern. Every time they use their FTL drive, even for small jumps, the after effects last longer. She pulled up another screen showing data from probes around the solar system. The spatial distortions are spreading. Jupiter's moons are showing gravitational anomalies that weren't there a week ago. Could it be natural? Wilson asked. Rodriguez shook her head. The timing matches perfectly with Imperial FTL jumps. There's no doubt they're causing this. She began typing a message to Earth. We need to get this information to Dr. Chen and his team immediately. In a secure underground facility in Colorado, Dr. Alan Foster met with Dr. Chen and a small team of scientists from around the world. They had gathered every piece of data they could find on Imperial technology. The problem is fundamental, Chen explained, pointing to a 3D model of an Imperial drive system. Their entire technological civilization is built on forcing dimensional shortcuts through space-time. It worked fine when they were the only ones doing it, and when they did it less frequently. But as their empire expanded, they're creating too many tiers, Foster said. Like poking too many holes in a piece of fabric. Exactly, Chen nodded. And they can't see it because their sensors aren't designed to detect these kinds of problems. They don't even know to look for them. A young physicist named Sandra Bell spoke up. We need to show them. Words won't be enough. Show them how? Asked Foster. We build a demonstration, Bell said. A small-scale version of what's happening, something they can't ignore. Foster looked troubled. That could be dangerous. Not as dangerous as doing nothing, Bell argued. Every day they keep using this technology, the tiers get worse. If we wait too long, it might be too late to fix, Chen thought for a moment. We would need access to Imperial technology to create an accurate demonstration. I might be able to help with that, said a voice from the doorway. They turned to see Admiral Williams with a tall, thin alien beside him. The alien had the typical 6 eyes of the Imperials, but his were a different color, green instead of yellow. This is Vrexnor, Williams said. He's been reviewing our findings in secret. He wants to help. Vrexnor stepped forward. His voice translator made his words sound flat and mechanical. Your mathematics are correct. I have verified them independently. But my superiors refused to believe humans could discover something we missed. Will you help us create a demonstration they can't ignore? Chen asked. The alien scientist was quiet for a moment. Yes, but we must be careful. If Overlord Zax Thule discovers I am helping you, the consequences would be severe. For all of us, Williams added grimly. Outside the facility, Imperial ships patrolled the skies. Their presence had become common across Earth in the weeks since their arrival. Most people tried to go about their lives normally, but everyone felt the weight of the alien shadow above them. What no one knew yet was that a small group of humans and one Imperial scientist were now working desperately against time, trying to save not just Earth but thousands of worlds across the galaxy from a disaster the mighty Empire was too proud to see coming. 1 month after the Imperials arrived, their presence had become a fact of life. Imperial shuttles flew between their ships and Earth daily. They had set up bases in 20 major cities. Most people tried to go on with their lives, but the feeling of being watched never went away. Commander Kate Johnson of Special Operations crouched in the shadows near the Imperial base outside of Chicago. Her team of 4 soldiers wore adaptive camouflage suits that masked their heat signatures. They had been watching the base for 3 nights. Target is moving, whispered Sergeant Eric Moore through their secure comm system. Imperial transport, heading west. Johnson raised her binoculars. The transport was larger than usual, with heavy armor plating. Follow it, but keep your distance. Their mission was simple but dangerous. Gather information about Imperial activities. The government needed to know what the aliens were planning. They tracked the transport to an abandoned factory complex 20 miles away. More Imperial vehicles were already there. Soldiers unloaded large metal containers. What are they building? Moore whispered. Johnson zoomed in with her binoculars. Looks like a permanent installation, much bigger than their other bases. She took pictures with a specialized camera designed to work around Imperial detection systems. As she watched, she saw something disturbing. A flicker in the air around the base, like heat waves, but with strange colors. It lasted only seconds, before disappearing. Did you see that? She asked. Moore nodded. Third time tonight, getting more frequent. Johnson checked her scanner. Energy readings are off the charts. Whatever they're doing in there, it's affecting the local space-time. She sent the data back to headquarters, then signaled her team to withdraw. As they moved through the forest, Johnson couldn't shake the feeling that they were running out of time. At the secret research facility in Colorado, Dr. Chen and Vrex Nor worked side by side. They had converted an old missile silo into a laboratory, where they could study the effects of Imperial technology safely away from prying eyes. The dimensional tier near Australia has grown by 30%, Chen said, pointing to a monitor, and we've detected new ones forming near Imperial bases in Brazil and Russia. Vrex Nor's 6 eyes blinked rapidly, a sign of distress in his species. It is happening faster than I calculated. The Empire's mining operations on your moon have accelerated the process. Dr. Sandra Bell and Jack Nguyen entered the lab carrying new equipment. They had been working with Vrex Nor to build a device that could detect the tiers more accurately. We've finished the new sensor array, Bell said. It can detect dimensional instabilities within a radius of 500 miles. Good, Chen nodded. We need to deploy these around the world immediately. Nguyen looked worried. The Imperial security forces are increasing their patrols. Getting these past them won't be easy. I have a contact in the Earth Defense Force, Chen said. Commander Johnson. She can help distribute them. Vrex Nor moved to a large containment chamber in the center of the lab. Inside was a small device they had built using modified Imperial technology. Our demonstration model is ready, he said. We can show my people exactly what will happen if they continue on this path. Will they listen? Bell asked. Some will, Vrex Nor replied. But Overlord Zax Thule and his military commanders, they believe admitting error is a sign of weakness. In Washington, D.C., Secretary General Davis sat across from Dr. Frank Wilson, who had just finished presenting his findings to a joint Human-Imperial Scientific Committee. How did it go? Davis asked. Wilson sighed. Not well. I showed them the data. The dimensional tiers, the increasing instability, everything. Most of the Imperial scientists walked out halfway through. All of them? No, Wilson said. 3 stayed behind. They asked questions afterward. I think they're concerned, even if they won't admit it publicly. Davis looked out the window at the Imperial flagship hovering over the city. We need more allies among them. The Imperial Science Director Televox, could she be approached? Possibly, Wilson said. She seemed less dismissive than the others, but any Imperial who sides with us is risking everything. The door opened, and an aide rushed in. Sir, we're getting reports of unusual activity at Imperial bases worldwide. They're accelerating their construction projects and bringing in more ships. Davis frowned. They're speeding up their colonization timeline. Why? Maybe they know we're onto something, Wilson suggested. On the Imperial flagship, Overlord Zax Thule met with his military commanders. The ship's bridge was massive, with view screens showing different parts of Earth. The humans are becoming problematic, Zax Thule said. They ask too many questions about our technology. General Drax, the fleet commander, made a dismissive gesture with one of his 4 arms. They are primitive. What could they possibly understand about our technology? Nonetheless, Zax Thule continued, some of our scientists have reported concerning findings after reviewing human research. Dimensional instabilities have been detected near our bases. A coincidence, Drax said. Or natural phenomena these humans have misinterpreted. Imperial scientist Televox stepped forward. Unlike the others, she had been studying human science with actual interest. My overlord, I believe we should at least investigate their claims. The humans have a different approach to physics. Their mathematics regarding dimensional stability is quite sophisticated, despite their technological limitations. Zax Thul's eyes narrowed. Are you suggesting these creatures know something we do not? I am suggesting that different perspectives can sometimes reveal blind spots, Televox said carefully. It would cost us little to examine their findings. Enough, General Drax interrupted. These humans are spreading fear and disruption. They should be controlled more firmly. I recommend we accelerate our settlement plans and establish full Imperial authority. Zax Thul was quiet for a moment. Yes. The time for observation is over. Begin the next phase immediately. Increase our presence in all major population centers. As Televox left the meeting, she sent a coded message to Vrex Noor. She had been secretly communicating with him since he first shared the human findings with her. Her message was simple, but urgent. They will not listen. Proceed with demonstration. Back at the research facility, Chen received the message from Vrex Noor. He called an emergency meeting with his team and Admiral Williams. The Empire is accelerating their plans, Chen explained. They're dismissing our warnings and pushing forward with their colonization. The dimensional tiers are getting worse. Every day, Bell added. If we don't act soon, it might be too late. Admiral Williams looked grim. Then we have no choice. We need to show them what they're doing. In a way they can't ignore. Operation Looking Glass, Chen said, nodding. A controlled demonstration of the dimensional fracture effect. Where? Asked Nguyen. Jupiter's moon, Callisto, Williams replied. Far enough away to be safe, close enough for their sensors to detect it clearly. We'll need authorization from the president, Bell said. Williams stood up. I'll handle that. You focus on making sure the demonstration is perfect. We only get one chance at this. As the meeting ended, Chen looked at the images of the growing dimensional tiers on his monitors. Strange colors leaked from them, like wounds in reality itself. Humanity had never faced a threat like this before, not just to Earth, but to the very fabric of space-time. And the irony wasn't lost on him. The mighty Galactic Empire, with all its power and arrogance, was blind to the danger it was creating. Now it was up to humans, the primitive species they had dismissed, to save them from themselves. The day of Operation Looking Glass arrived faster than anyone had planned. Imperial ships were now positioned over every major city on Earth. Their troops patrolled the streets. People were being taken to processing centers for integration, training. The situation was growing worse by the hour. In the control room of the secret research facility, Admiral Williams stood before a group of military and scientific leaders. Behind him, a large screen showed Jupiter and its moons. The president has given authorization, Williams said. We proceed at 800 hours. Dr. Chen pointed to a small device sitting on a table in the middle of the room. It looked simple. A metal cube about the size of a lunchbox with glowing blue lines across its surface. This is a miniature version of an Imperial fold drive, Chen explained. Thanks to Vrex Noor, we've modified it to safely demonstrate what happens when this technology is used incorrectly. Ambassador Susan Miller looked concerned. Are we sure this is safe? We've taken every precaution, Chen assured her. The demonstration will create a small controlled dimensional tear on Callisto. It will last approximately 30 seconds before collapsing naturally. And the Empire will detect it? Asked General Bennett. They can't miss it, Chen said. Every Imperial ship in the solar system will register the event on their sensors. It will be unmistakable. Williams nodded to a communications officer. Send the message to all Imperial command centers. Tell them we have important information to share regarding dimensional stability and to monitor Callisto. Most Imperial commanders ignored the message. They had grown tired of human warnings and considered them attempts to delay the colonization process. But a few, including Televox and 3 other scientists, prepared to observe. On the horizon, space station orbiting Earth, Captain Lisa Rodriguez received the final launch codes. Payload is secure, she reported. Launching in 5 minutes. The small probe carrying the demonstration device shot away from the station, accelerating toward Jupiter. It would take 3 hours to reach its destination. Back on Earth, Imperial forces were closing in on the research facility. They had detected unusual energy readings and communications. "We have company," a security officer reported. "Imperial, troops 2 miles out and closing." Williams turned to Chen. "How much time do you need?" "We just need to hold them off until the demonstration is complete," Chen said. 3 hours and 30 minutes. "We can do that," Williams said, though he didn't sound convinced. Commander Johnson and her team set up defensive positions around the facility. They weren't trying to win, just buy time. "Remember," Johnson told her soldiers, "we're not fighting a war here. We're just delaying them until the demonstration works." The first Imperial ships appeared on the horizon. Johnson took a deep breath and gave the order to activate the facility's defense systems. In space, the probe approached Callisto. Everything was proceeding according to plan. In the control room, Chen watched the probe's telemetry with Vrexenor at his side. "Energy levels are stable," Chen said. "No signs of early activation." Vrexenor's 6 eyes were focused on another screen showing data from Imperial ships. "Several Imperial vessels have changed course. They are moving to investigate." "Good," Chen nodded. "The more witnesses, the better." Outside, the sound of weapons fire grew louder. Imperial troops had reached the outer perimeter. Williams received a report from the front line. "They're using non-lethal weapons. They want to take the facility intact. That works in our favor," Miller said. "It will slow them down." The minutes ticked by. The probe landed on Callisto and deployed the demonstration device. In the control room, everyone held their breath. "Device is active," Chen reported. "Initiating in 3, 2, 1. On a desolate plain of Callisto, the small cube activated. It began to fold space in exactly the same way Imperial drives did, but with a critical difference. It was designed to make the flaw in their technology obvious. For a moment, nothing seemed to happen. Then, like a wound opening in reality itself, a tear appeared above the device. It was small at first, just a few feet across, but it grew rapidly. Strange colors leaked from it, colors that shouldn't exist in normal space. The tear pulsed and stretched, revealing glimpses of something else. Not empty space, not another dimension, but a kind of churning chaos between realities. In the control room, the sensors went wild. "It's working," Chen said, his voice barely above a whisper. "The tear is stable and visible." On Imperial ships throughout the solar system, alarms blared. Sensors detected a dimensional disturbance unlike anything they had recorded before. Ship captains rushed to their command centers. Scientists scrambled to understand what they were seeing. On the Imperial flagship, Overlord Zaxathul felt something he hadn't experienced in centuries. Fear. "What is happening?" he demanded. His science officer's voice trembled. "A dimensional tear has formed on the moon called Callisto. It matches the pattern described in the human warnings." "Impossible," General Drax growled. "Their technology is too primitive." "They used our own technology against us," Televox said, entering the command center. "They modified an Imperial fold drive to demonstrate what has been happening on a smaller scale across our empire." Zaxathul's 6 eyes blinked, rapidly. "Explain." "The humans discovered a flaw in our dimensional fold technology," Televox said. "The same technology that powers our ships, our weapons, our entire civilization. Every time we use it, we tear the fabric of reality a little more. These tears have been growing, spreading. The humans tried to warn us." On the screens, the tear on Callisto pulsed one final time before collapsing in on itself, leaving behind a shimmering distortion in space-time. "This was just a demonstration," Televox continued. "A controlled version of what is happening throughout Imperial space. But the real tears are not collapsing, they are growing." General Drax slammed his fist down. "This is human deception. They seek to undermine our authority." Scan all Imperial bases on Earth, Televox said calmly. You will find similar distortions, though smaller. They have been there all along. We just couldn't see them because our sensors weren't calibrated correctly. The scans confirmed her words. Small tears in reality flickered around every Imperial installation on Earth, growing stronger whenever their technology was active. Back at the research facility, Imperial troops had breached the outer defenses. They were making their way toward the control room when all Imperial communications suddenly went silent. Then, a new message came through on all channels. Ambassador Miller looked at the message. They're calling for a ceasefire and immediate talks. Williams couldn't hide his surprise. It worked? At least with some of them, Chen said. On the main view screen, a new message appeared. It was from the Imperial flagship, directed to all human and Imperial forces. This is Imperial Science Director Televox. By authority of the Galactic Council, I am ordering all Imperial forces to cease offensive operations immediately. We have verified human findings regarding dimensional stability issues. A scientific emergency has been declared. Johnson's voice came through on the comm system. The Imperial troops are withdrawing, sir. They just turned around and left. In the control room, people began to cheer, but Chen raised his hand for silence. This isn't over, he said. We've convinced them of the danger, but fixing it will be much harder. Ambassador Miller nodded in agreement. Now comes the real challenge, convincing an empire to change the very foundation of its technology. Outside, the Imperial ships that had been so threatening just hours before now seemed different, vulnerable, even dangerous to themselves. Humanity had delivered its warning. Now the Empire had to decide whether to run from their doomed technology while they still could. And for the first time since their arrival, humans looked up at the Imperial ships with something other than fear. They looked up with determination, and perhaps even a touch of pity. 2 weeks after the Callisto demonstration, Earth had changed dramatically. Most Imperial ships had moved to a higher orbit. Their bases on the ground operated at minimal power. The aggressive colonization had stopped completely. In Geneva, a joint Human-Imperial Council had been established. Representatives from both species sat around a large circular table. Overlord Zaxathul himself was present, though he seemed diminished somehow. His usual arrogance had faded, replaced by a wary caution. The evidence is undeniable, Imperial Science Director Televox was saying. The dimensional tiers are spreading throughout our empire. We have confirmed similar phenomena in 27 star systems. Ambassador Susan Miller nodded. Our sensors can now detect tiers forming as far away as Alpha Centauri. The effect is accelerating. Zaxthul's 6 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep distress. How long do we have? Dr. Chen consulted his tablet. At the current rate of expansion, critical failure will begin in approximately 4 years. The first systems to collapse will be those with the heaviest Imperial presence. General Drax, who had once dismissed human warnings, now looked grim. Can these tiers be repaired? Not with current technology, Chen said. But they can be contained if we act quickly. The most important step is to immediately cease using the dimensional fold drives. This statement caused a stir among the Imperial delegates. Their entire civilization depended on faster-than-light travel. You ask us to ground our fleet? Drax growled. To cut our empire into isolated fragments? We're asking you to save your empire, Admiral Williams countered, and to save countless lives, both human and Imperial. The debate continued for hours. The Imperial representatives were divided. Some accepted the evidence and pushed for immediate action. Others resisted, seeing it as a human plot to weaken their power. Meanwhile, in a different part of the building, a more practical meeting was taking place. Chief Engineer Peter Walsh, a short man with calloused hands and practical ideas, met with a team of Imperial engineers. Your fold drives are incredible technology, Walsh said, his voice reflecting genuine admiration. Just pointed in the wrong direction. You've been forcing your way through space-time instead of working with it. He displayed a set of technical drawings on a holographic projector. These are our designs for a new type of drive. We call it the harmonic wave drive. Instead of tearing space, it resonates with natural dimensional frequencies. An Imperial engineer named Kreldor studied the designs. This is primitive, but the underlying theory is sound. The efficiency would be lower than our current drives. But it wouldn't destroy reality, Walsh pointed out. And with refinement, we believe the efficiency could approach 90% of your current drives within a few years. The Imperial engineers huddled together, discussing in their own language. Finally, Kreldor turned back to Walsh. We will help develop this technology. It will require extensive modifications to our ships, but it can be done. Across the world, the news spread. The mighty Galactic Empire was changing course because of human intervention. For the first time, people began to feel hope instead of fear when they looked at the alien ships above. But not everyone was convinced. In a secure room deep within the Imperial flagship, General Drax met with a group of hardline military commanders. "This is humiliation," Drax hissed. "The humans have tricked Zax Thul with their primitive science." "What would you have us do?" asked Commander Vexbor. "The dimensional tiers are real. We have verified them ourselves." "They are exaggerated," Drax insisted. "A natural phenomenon the humans are using to manipulate us. I will not see the Empire weakened by fear." He outlined his plan, a sudden military strike against key human facilities, followed by full colonization. They would simply overwhelm Earth with the Empire's superior numbers. What Drax didn't know was that Televox had anticipated this reaction. Hidden sensors in the room transmitted his words directly to Zax Thul. The Overlord listened to Drax's treachery with growing anger. Once, he might have agreed with the General's assessment, but he had seen the evidence with his own eyes now. He had watched the tier form on Callisto, had seen the sensor readings from across Imperial space. In the council chamber, debate continued until a side door opened, and Overlord Zax Thul entered, accompanied by Imperial guards. The room fell silent. "I have made my decision," Zax Thul announced. "The Empire will follow the human recommendations. All fold drives will be shut down immediately. Research into alternative technology will receive our highest priority." He turned to address the human delegates directly. "Your species saw what we could not. You warned us when you could have simply protected your own world. The Empire acknowledges this debt." Dr. Chen spoke up. "It's not just about Earth. The dimensional collapse would eventually affect the entire galaxy, perhaps beyond. We all share this reality." Zax Thul made a gesture that in Imperial culture indicated deep respect, something no human had seen before. As the council session ended, people gathered outside in the streets. News of the agreement had spread quickly. For the first time since the Imperial ships arrived, there was a feeling of partnership rather than fear. 6 months later, the first converted Imperial ship prepared for its maiden voyage. The massive vessel hovered above Earth's North Pole, its engines humming with a new kind of energy, the harmonic wave drive developed by joint human-Imperial teams. On the bridge, Captain Maria Gonzalez looked out at the stars. As the human representative assigned to the ship, she had watched the incredible speed of the conversion process. The Imperials, once they committed to a new path, moved with impressive efficiency. "All systems are ready," reported the Imperial pilot. "Harmonic resonance is stable," Gonzalez nodded. "Then let's make history." The ship moved forward, accelerating steadily. Then, instead of tearing a hole in space-time, it created a rippling wave of energy that carried the vessel smoothly into faster-than-light travel. Back on Earth, scientists monitored the existing dimensional tears. They were no longer growing. Some smaller ones had even begun to heal naturally now that they weren't being stressed by constant Imperial technology. In his laboratory, Dr. Chen watched the readings with satisfaction. Next to him stood Vrexenor, now officially the Imperial ambassador to Earth. "It will take decades to convert all Imperial technology," Vrexenor said. "But we have begun." Chen smiled. "Sometimes the most advanced civilization isn't the one with the most powerful technology. It's the one that can see the consequences of using it." Outside, the sky was clearing of Imperial ships as they departed to spread the warning throughout their vast empire. The ships that remained no longer seemed threatening. They were partners now, working to undo the damage before it was too late. Humanity had accomplished something remarkable. They hadn't defeated the Galactic Empire through force of arms. They had simply understood the universe a little better, and had the courage to warn their would-be conquerors to run from destruction while there was still time. And in doing so, they had earned something far more valuable than victory in battle. They had earned respect.